like to call to order the meeting of the Maricopa County Community College District Governing Board for May 22nd, 2018. The first item on the agenda is item number 1, a truth and taxation hearing as required under state law. The Maricopa County Community College District is considering a proposal to increase primary property taxes in fiscal year 2018 to 2019 on existing property. The proposed increase is 1.3%, which equals $5,935,113 in additional property tax revenues from existing property. At this time, I will afford any resident or taxpayer the opportunity to address the governing board considering the proposed action under consideration to increase primary property taxes on existing property. Do we have anyone that wishes to speak? Seeing none, are there any comments from members of the board? At this time, before I guess we concluded discussing voting. Okay, we'll conclude the truth and taxation hearing. Next item on the agenda is item number 2, a public hearing concerning the adoption of the proposed budget of the Maricopa County Community College District for fiscal year 2018-2019. This hearing is required under state law. The purpose of the hearing is to give any resident or taxpayer the opportunity to protest the inclusion of any item in the proposed budget. If there are any questions, I will defer them to Mr. Hibbs to answer. This time will afford any resident or taxpayer the opportunity to address the governing board concerning the proposed action under consideration. Do we have anyone wishes to speak? Are there any comments from members of the board? That concludes the public hearings. I would now like to convene the special board meeting of May 22nd, 2018. The first item on the agenda is item 1, a motion to levy the increased property taxes on as previously described. Is there a motion to that effect?
I so move.
Second.
Is there additional discussion by board members? Seeing none, I'm going to call on Mr. Hibbs to explain the net result of this action.
Mr. Chairman, excuse me, I'm still used to being at the legislature.
Is your microphone on?
I will get it. Mr. President, members of the board, when you say explained, are you talking about the entire budget generally, or are you?
We're talking about the tax levy right now.
The tax levy. I think the easiest way to understand the tax levy is that both the primary and secondary tax levies are declining. The secondary level levy is going down as our bonds are being paid off. So what the intent here, recognizing that there will not be any secondary levy for capital in the future, is to move some of the reduction each year in the primary and secondary tax levies over to the primary side so that we have sufficient funds for capital in the future. The impact of doing that is still a reduction in the total tax levy. It goes down this year from $1.40.96 to $1.37.54. On the primary side of that, there is a slight increase of $1.50 on a household of $100,000. And these monies will be used in the future for capital purposes at the district.
Thank you, Mr. Hibbs. Dr. Thor.
Thank you, Mr. Hendricks. I want to confirm that the amount of money that we have available for capital from the last general obligation bond will be exhausted in the next 3 years, and that if the board takes this action, it will provide us with a source for that capital that could potentially avoid the necessity of us going out for another general obligation bond?
Mr. President, Dr. Thor, that is absolutely correct.
Any further comments from the board? And just one further clarification, because I want to just be sure that I understand it clearly. I'd gotten a couple of emails commenting about, I see you're going to vote on a tax increase tonight. I want to be sure that I understand clearly that we're voting on an increase of the primary tax, but that the total tax is actually going down. So although we're voting on an increase of 1, the total tax payable is a decrease. So the net result tonight, if this passes, is a decrease in taxes.
That is correct.
If there are not further comments, we will go ahead and vote. In accordance with state law, the governing board will now vote on this motion by roll call vote. Mr. Bartning?
Yes.
Mrs. McGrath?
Yes.
Aye.
Mrs. Haber?
Aye.
Mrs. Livingston?
Aye.
Dr. Thor?
Aye.
Mr. Sarr?
Aye.
And Hendricks votes aye. By a vote of 7-0, the motion passes. Item 2 of the agenda is approval of the proposed fiscal year 2018-2019 Maricopa Community College District budget. And approving the budget, the board also authorizes the expenditure of budgeted revenues and realized or designated fund balances within the total amount budgeted in each fund. General fund, auxiliary, plant fund, quasi-endowment, restricted, Prop 301, and debt service. Is there any additional discussion by board members? Mr. Sarr?
Let me first say that I want to thank Elliot and his staff for probably, in my 8 years, this is the most detailed and well put together budget that I'm familiar with, so thank you very much. Having said that, there's a couple things I'm concerned about in the budget, and my philosophy has always been that a budget should drive the organization to accomplish its vision and mission as defined by a set of metrics which we do monitor every November. This past year's report, like others in the recent past, was a mix of status quo, and in some cases there were concerning downward trends. Most notably was a decline in enrollment, both headcount and Hsc, and the negative trend in our Student Success Initiative. So my question, Mr. Elliott, is Mr. Hibbs, is where in this budget are the resources to stop the decline in both of these indicators?
Mr. President, Mr. Sarr, I really think the place that there is investment here, maybe in a couple different ways, but certainly the transformation money that's in this budget is designed to improve the student experience here at Maricopa Community College District, as well as the outcomes in terms of certificates, graduation, and retention.
I think, and I get that. But a big part of our problem, in my mind, and we've talked about it for a long time, is enrollment and the lack of enrollment. Mrs. McGrath has talked about it endlessly for years, and we're looking at a decline since 2010 of 11% in head count, and I'm just concerned that that's a trend. And what I see in this budget and what I see in the transformation is an attempt to make a better engine, and I totally get that it'll be a better engine when everything is implemented. But if you don't have the gas to run the engine, it's kind of a waste. So I see the gasoline as students, and the number of students that we have in Maricopa County, especially since we live in a county that's the fastest growing in the nation, we're sitting here with declining enrollment as one of the institutions of higher education. So I'm concerned that, the budget drives a lot of things, and I'm hoping that we can take some of this budget and apply it to going after the potential students that we know are out there in the growth of Maricopa County and getting them to a point where they can become successful in our operation here at Maricopa Community Colleges. So I'm not opposed to the budget by any means, but I just want to make sure that the chancellor knows, and we've had this discussion, that I want to see the trend of dropping enrollment, and in some cases a drop in our outcomes as well, especially in the Student Success Initiative. So I look forward to seeing what can be done in this budget. Thank you.
Any further comments?
Mis-
Okay. Mr. Barney?
Thank you, President Hendricks. And I would also like to applaud Mr. Hibbs and his team for this budget. It decreases student tuition, which I think is a step in the right direction for our mandate to make education nearly as free as possible, increases faculty pay, and it addresses the reserves challenge. And being very new, I heard about this coming into the board, but it seems to have addressed that in a very fiscally responsible manner. And the last thing, I think, in response to Mr. Saar, I also have had some concerns about the enrollment, and I know that a lot of people have discussed this. One thing I keep hearing about is technology, and so what I wanted to ask you, Mr. Hibbs, is I see that we have $5.97 million for updating technology licenses and operations. In your opinion, would that address some of the technological concerns that I've been hearing with relation to enrollment or some other parts of the system?
I have to think about this. President Hendricks and Mr. Barding, the things that are in here for technology supplement and complement what's also in transformation for technology. Some of the aspects of transformation are technological changes that are, again, to enhance that student experience. I know one of the things that we are expecting to come up in, I believe, in December, and Ed is here and can probably talk maybe a little bit better to this, but it is that thing where prospective students or people wanting to enroll can come to one site to enroll with any of the colleges rather than having to go to a variety of them. So all of these things that with technology, those are the things that we're driving toward, is to make that student experience so much easier and to make the student be able to get what they need through their education as cost effectively as they possibly can.
Thank you. And I just again like to echo, I think we have something amazing here, and to me this is the start of addressing that overall issue with student enrollment. I think we're off on the right foot. So thank you again.
Any further comments? Okay, we'll need a motion and a second for adoption of the budget.
I move we adopt the budget.
I second.
In accordance with state law, the governing board will now vote on this motion by roll call vote. Mr. Saar.
Aye.
Dr. Thor.
Aye.
Ms. Livingston.
Aye.
Mrs. Haber.
Aye.
Mrs. McGrath.
Aye.
Mr. Barton.
Aye.
Hendricks votes aye by a motion of 7-0. Motion passes and the budget is approved. Get a motion and a second to adjourn the special meeting.
So moved.
I move we adjourn.
Special meeting is adjourned. So do we have to wait till 7 o'clock? Okay, at this time I'll call to order the meeting of the Maricopa County Community College District Governing Board for May 22nd, 2018. We will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Avia Morrow.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I know, I took it. There is a comma. But commonly spoken.
Thank you, Ms. Morrow. Substitutions, we have Dr. Cassandra Kakar for Chris Haynes. Student life reports, Rio Salado College.
Good evening. President Hendricks, members of the board, Dr. Harper Marinick, members of the CEC and guests. My name is John Bastian. I'm the coordinator of student life and leadership at Rio Salado College. And I'm here this evening to support our students from Rio and also share with you many of the opportunities that are available to our Rio Salado students. To share some experiences about Rio Salado and the engagement opportunities, we have two students here tonight. The first one who will speak is Caitlin Magoo, and secondly, Avea Morrow, who you just met, will speak also.
President Hendricks, members of the board, Dr. Harper Marinick, members of the CEC and guests, My name is Caitlin Magoo, and I'm a student here at Rio Salado College. This evening, I am representing Rio Salado as part of our Student Life presentation. As you know, Rio Salado offers a non-traditional approach to learning as we are primarily online. Although we are online, we have a variety of engagement opportunities and activities, which is the real reason why I decided to stay at Rio Salado and continue my education because of these type of activities that we have available. As mentioned, here are some of our engagement opportunities, with two of our larger being the Phi Theta Kappa International Honor Society, as well as the National Society of Leadership and Success, which I'm going to touch on a little bit further as I was honored to be a part of that society this year. For the National Society of Leadership and Success, there are multiple requirements to obtain abduction. For me personally, the two most important were the Leadership Training Day as well as the Success Networking Teams. These activities and workshops within the Leadership Training Day helped lead us to find our purpose, secure goals, and receive continuous support to find success within our Success Networking Teams. We actually had continuous forms of support, whether that was official meetings on site or through our own type of Facebook groups or online groups that we made to make sure we were always held accountable and find the support we needed to obtain success. This is our 5th year as a chapter at Rio Salado, and this year alone, we honored 45 students as inducted members, with 6 receiving the National Engaged Leader Award. Now I'm going to hand on over to Avea Morrow to further go over information.
President Hendricks, members of the board, Chancellor Harper-Marinick, board members of the CEC,
Would you
and
please
guests.
stand in front of the microphone?
Okay,
Thank you.
is this better?
Better.
Okay, perfect. So many of you remember me. My name is Avea Morrow. I'm a student and employee at Rio Salado College, and I've been very blessed with the opportunities the Student Life organization has offered me, such as running for international president within Phi Theta Kappa. So I want to cover a bit more about our Phi Theta Kappa chapter this year. We were tasked with a college project focusing on scholarships and why students kind of would get to the school but stop their enrollment process. So we worked with faculty and adjuncts to discuss methods of bridging that gap between, the student and their instructor. We provided them with templates so they could get their instructors to write a lot more, personalized letters of recommendation, as well as help them understand what their instructors need to know and need to receive from them in order to write those letters of recommendation. We also had an Honors in Action project, which focused on life with disabilities. We found that through our research, a lot of people had a lot of misconceptions when it came to the disabled, such as saying that their quality of life was probably very drastically lower, and that they probably just should stay at home and get money from the government. So we put a quiz forth, and we had our members actually speak to a person who is legally blind and in a wheelchair and actually runs District 4 of the Blinded Veterans Association. She spoke about what you should do if you encounter someone with a disability, such as if someone around you is blind, talk to them, let them know you're there, and just be friendly. She also talked about her quality of life and that she's still a very valuable member of the community, and she would like more people to recognize, just because she's in limited space doesn't mean she's in limited potential. So with that, we also had 2 students this year who got recognized as the All Arizona Scholars. We have Crystal Roberto and Jamie Paredo. Jamie Paredo was actually honored as the top 50 students to receive that distinguished scholarship. Thank you. I'll now leave stuff to John Bastian. Thank you.
Thank you, Avea. So in closing, I just want to bring up a couple more points. As you can see by this slide, there are many opportunities at Rio Salado for engagement. We provide a strong education in terms of classes, but there also is a strong opportunities for education outside of the classes also. Dental hygiene has opportunities. The teacher education has a student group. As you can see, there's some others that you may be familiar with there. One more thing I want to highlight is the Be Leader Foundation that some of you may be familiar with. We have a partnership with them where 2 students annually are involved with mentorship programs working with middle school students to promote the college going process. And the final thing on the bottom there I want to highlight is that we're creating a new alumni association at Rio, and we're involving some of our alums just in terms of engagement for our current students, but also for the college as a whole. As you can see, for the upcoming year, we have a few ideas in front of us. We want to increase participation, engagement in some of our programs, some of our opportunities at Rio. And we also want to use these alumni who are coming to us or who have been a part of us to continue to support our current students. Please feel free, if you have questions for myself or the students at the end, to go ahead and let us know. And in closing, I just want to do 2 things. One, I want to applaud and congratulate Avea. Avea took a big step this year. She's been a part-time student at Rio for a few years now, and she ran for international president for Phi Theta Kappa, which I think was somewhat nerve-wracking and challenging. She did not end up winning, but she did a great job in the candidate caucuses and also just representing herself from Rio Salado at the national convention. So congratulations, Avea. And the last thing I want to state is thank you to you, the board, and to our chancellor, and particularly to you, Dr. Bustamante, for your support so we can have these opportunities where students can be engaged with opportunities outside the classes but still get a quality education. Thank you. Feel free if you have any questions for any of us.
Any questions or comments from the board? Thank you. Chancellor report, I show no report.
Mr. Hendricks, that's right, no report tonight, but if I could take 1 minute to introduce one of our new college presidents,
Please
incoming college president. We have Dr. Larry Johnson in the audience, incoming president at Phoenix College, so we welcome you to Maricopa. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Mr. Hendricks.
Thank you. Okay, we have 2 speakers signed in for citizens interim, but they're both speaking on an item that is going to be addressed after the consent agenda. So I'm going to proceed with the consent agenda and then come back to citizens interim. All items with an asterisk are consent matters unless they are removed from the consent agenda at this time. Any item may be removed from the agenda by the chancellor as a matter of administrative prerogative or by the governing board upon motion duly made, seconded, and approved. Consent agenda items will be approved by one motion, and there will be no specific discussion of these items. Items removed from the consent agenda will be approved during the consideration of the non-consent agenda. I believe that we want to remove item 9.4 from the consent agenda. Is that correct, Chancellor?
Mr. Hendricks, thank you. 2 items, actually. We would like to remove and table for the next meeting item 9.3. The item as presented tonight does not include all the information that is pertinent, so we will bring that back in June with a complete item. And we also would like to move 9.4 from non-consent from consent, I apologize, to non-consent.
Okay, we will move item 9.4 to non-consent, and item 9.3 will be tabled until the next meeting. If I can get a motion and a second for the consent agenda.
I move that we accept the consent agenda.
Second.
All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed by saying nay. Consent agenda passes by a vote of 7-0. Now return to item 9.4, approve consideration of letter of intent for ground lease. Before we have a motion on this, I will return to the citizens interim. The citizens interim is an opportunity for members of the public to address the governing board. In compliance with the open meeting law, the governing board will neither discuss nor take action on issues raised during this portion of the agenda. Actually, as I'm reading this, we are going to take action on this tonight. This is a general boilerplate verbiage, so. When necessary, issues will be taken under advisement and placed on subsequent agenda. Presenting concerns to the board and the free expression of ideas should be communicated with decorum and respect. I'm going to call on Mr. Todd Noel.
President Hendricks, members of the board, Chancellor Harper-Marinick, Todd Noel, Executive Vice President with Colliers International. I represent Great Hearts Academies. I'm here to answer or address any questions you have as relates to, I think it's 9.4, the ground lease on Southbound Community Campus. Thank you.
Are there any questions or comments? It's actually citizens interim for comments by citizens, but our next motion is going to be discussion of.
It's really non-citizens interim, it's members of the public directly addressing action.
So really no question and answer. Or do you think we get a question and answer? Okay. Yes. Okay, do we have questions for the board? I don't think we have any questions.
Here should any arise. Thank you for your time.
And as a second speaker signed in, Ricardo Valencia.
Here for the same reason.
Okay, good enough. Then we will move forward. Mrs. McGrath, if you were going to make a motion on item 9.4.
Mr. President, I move that the board accept the letter of intent for the ground lease of property near the North Campus complex of South Mountain Community College.
I second.
Thank you, Mr. Partney. Before we vote, I want to remind members so that we're clear, a yes vote will have the effect of accepting the letter of intent regarding the ground lease. A no vote will have the effect of rejecting the letter of intent for the ground lease. Are there any questions or comments from the board before we vote? Seeing none, we will proceed to vote. Given that this is a ground lease, let's do a roll call vote. Mr. Bartney, how do you vote?
Nay.
Mrs. McGrath, how do you vote?
Nay.
Mrs. Haber?
Nay.
Dr. Thor?
Nay.
Mrs. Livingston?
Nay.
Mr. Sarr?
Nay.
And Hendricks votes no by a vote of 7-0. The motion fails. Information first readings. Item number 11, adopt the process for development for modification of faculty academic policies. Chancellor Harper-Marinick.
Thank you, Mr. Hendricks, members of the board. As a reminder, as the item indicates, when the board adopted a resolution in February of 2018, there was a request made of the chancellor to come back with a process for the development or modification of faculty academic policies that is inclusive and addresses specific items that you had listed in that resolution. So tonight we bring as a first reading, not obviously for your approval tonight, we will come back in June with that request. We bring a process that has been developed by a task force that was inclusive of faculty representing all of the colleges, 2 college presidents, 2 vice presidents, representation, the provost, thank you, representation from human resources, the legal office, and we believe is a process that is responsive to what was specified in that resolution by the governing board. So I will ask Provost Dr. Carla Fisher to guide you through the flow of the process. We have presented the diagram to you before, but we think it would be helpful if she were to guide all of us through the way this would work. And if you have any questions, we welcome that. But again, this is just a first reading, and approval would not be requested until June. Thank you. Dr. Fisher?
President Hendricks, members of the board, Chancellor Harper-Marinick, members of CEC, colleagues, and guests. I'm here to walk you through the process that we put together. This proposed process starts with anyone in the institution that wants to bring forward a new policy or a revision to a faculty policy through a senior council or the faculty senate. And so you can see that here. If the senior council decides to recommend the policy change, it would go to the faculty policy recommendation team. It's a team that has an equal number of faculty and administrators on it. It's inclusive of the diverse roles, the academic, occupational, service, and so forth within our institution, and has a liaison with legal and HR right there on the team. So that team will discuss and has a couple of options. They may either work with the senior councils and the Senate to come to an agreement on the language, and that's what you see here. More of a vetting process. It's not a voting process. It's a place for all of us to come together and give sort of a pre-mortem. What works with this? What doesn't work with this? And let's think about it. And if any of those councils want to loop it out for broader comment within their constituencies, they are more than welcome to do that. They would then bring that back to the policy recommendation team, and it would move forward. Another option for the policy recommendation team, though, is to send the proposal back for more information or a clearer rationale for a proposed policy change. Or they can simply forward the proposed policy to the chancellor with a recommendation, always with a recommendation for or against. So nothing gets tied up within that team. It always goes to the chancellor for her to take forward, perhaps to the board. If she decides that she needs more information or chooses not to move it forward to the board, it would go back to the team. Otherwise, she can move it forward to the board for the governing board to approve for implementation or to send back. The idea in this policy or in this process was to keep it relatively simple, make it very inclusive, and make sure that everything gets moved forward so nothing gets stuck within any one given team. And it preserves, of course, the final approval authority of the board as noted in the resolution. I think that walks us through. I would stand for any questions.
Any questions or comments?
I'm sorry, Mr. Hendricks. Let me just, may have said this, but I can't remember now what I said. I want to make clear that we understand that this is for primarily academic policies for faculty members, and that it would not include any dialogue at this point on the items that the board had specifically asked that not be included, and that is compensation, benefits, accountability, and organizational operations. Anything else that is not included in those four would be going through this process.
Dr. Thor.
I think actually my question is for the chancellor. In the resolution that the majority of the board adopted in February, you were given some fairly broad authority to roll forward policies that are currently included in the residential faculty policy manual. Is it your intention that this process would be used for those policies that will roll forward, or will you approach that differently?
Thank you, Dr. Thor, Mr. Hendricks, members of the board. Our intention is to first have a new process as requested by the board. In the resolution, it was indicated that we needed a new process by July 1st of 2018, so that's what we're hoping for approval in June. Once we have the process in place, we will use this process to look at all of the policies in what we call the Residential Faculty Policy Manual and come back with the proper recommendations for the board. Yes, our intention right now is to use this process moving forward.
Mr. Saar.
The thing I don't see up there is a start date and a finish date, which is always kind of nice to have. But I understand it's an ongoing process, but I would hate to see this process will loop and loop and loop, and we don't get to an end. So I'm not going to force you to give me some dates, but I just want to make sure that you understand that this will happen at some reasonable time frame.
Understood, Mr. Sar. I am as impatient as you are. For the first round of revisions, we do have a timeline because we are required to bring a proposed manual to the board before the end of October, which means that if we follow our typical policy process, that would be first read in September, and some sort of adoption or not, or it could be a timeline longer than that. So we do have that for the first round. Moving forward, I agree with you that we need clarity on the timelines and how the process would work. Also, we do not envision that we're going to go through this process every single time, every year, because there may be years when there is no need to have new policies or change existing policies. So the details, we need to get through the first round, but I agree with you that we need to be very clear about the expectations on timeline. And I believe everybody else would agree with that.
Any further questions or comments? Okay, we'll move on to item 12, Human Resources Review Employments. Are there questions or comments? Mrs. McGrath, you're not going to comment on this? Okay. You finally got me trained, and I don't know what to do. Monitoring report, business services, review budget analyst report. Any questions or comments? Faculty reports, John Champel.
Good evening, President Hendricks, members of the Governing Board, Chancellor, CEC, fellow faculty, staff, administrators, and guests. My name is John Champel. I instruct students in both majors and non-majors biology at Phoenix College, the flagship. And I just completed my 15th year of instruction and professional service within the Maricopa Community Colleges. I was elected Faculty Senate President of Phoenix College, where I served in that role for 2 years. I have now been elected the President of the Faculty Executive Council, FEC, and I'm delighted to still have the opportunity to stand before you this evening. Everything that has brought me to this point, that of assuming the role of FEC President, has been rooted in my emergent understandings of shared governance and its importance in all institutions of higher learning. Shared governance at its core is a principle whereby institutions of higher education ensure that the core mission, teaching and learning, is at the forefront of every decision. This board's actions February 27th brought to light a key question. Why is institutional shared governance of inherent value to community college students? Evidence from the educational research literature and the district's own research shows students need to be engaged with the institution in order to succeed, and that students become more engaged when they truly connect to individuals at those institutions, full-time staff, and at the center, full-time faculty. The faculty undoubtedly interact the most with our students and are responsible for creating and teaching the teaching and learning environment. When faculty are able to genuinely contribute to the educational mission of our institution and how it is implemented, then teaching and learning and our students remain at the forefront of that mission. Shared governance is engagement. Engagement in decision-making, resource allocation, program development and delivery, and more. Highly engaged faculty are essential for highly engaged and therefore successful students. Without shared governance, institutional decisions can and do result that adversely impact teaching and learning. For the same reasons we would expect doctors to be at the decision-making table of hospitals, collaborating as equals with administrators on funding allocations and on improving organizational operation and effectiveness, so too are faculty necessary, essential to the decision-making of institutions of higher education. Those with the expertise of an institution's core mission need to be at the decision-making table. Not only are we as faculty all about what happens in the classroom, but we are also about getting students to the classroom. As the Faculty Foundation, we help dozens of students with tens of thousands of dollars every year. And given the recent DACA ruling, the Faculty Foundation is now pursuing external funding to pay out-of-state tuition for current DACA students in the district, starting this summer, to keep them in school. We are also pursuing community partnerships to increase the funding available for this grant program. Faculty advise, both formally and informally. Faculty write external grants to fund students in research inside and outside of the classroom, and to provide internships to help students gain real-world experience. The Board of Directors of the Association of Governing Boards of Universities and Colleges, your very own peers, just 5 months ago, in October of 2017, released a statement reminding all college governing board members of the importance of shared governance. I'd like to read some key quotes from this statement. Quote, "In higher education's volatile environment, shared governance is essential," unquote. Quote, "Effective shared governance provides the context for meaningful engagement and decision-making in virtually every private and public college or university," unquote. Quote, "At its best, shared governance is about how key constituents in institutional communities, traditionally faculty, administrators, and board members, engage in achieving a commonly supported mission. For example, these groups customarily participate in strategic planning, institutional budgeting, and discussion of critical issues such as campus climate and student learning outcomes," unquote. Quote, "In today's challenging environment, shared governance needs to work, not as an afterthought, but rather as a fundamental driver of institutional change and success," unquote. In light of these comments from fellow governing board members, I encourage each of us at Maricopa to reflect on where we are, where we want to be, and to consider if the path we now find ourselves on is really in the best interests of our students. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Adjunct faculty, no report? No report. We'll move to governing board reports. Mr. Bartling.
Thank you, President Hendricks. I would just like to report that this was a very enjoyable month of getting to see the culmination of the community colleges at the convocations and the commencements. So thank you to each of the colleges that had me at their ceremonies, and to the convocations, to get to hear the student speakers and meet faculty and just see what this institution is all about. It was really an enjoyable part for me of my time on the board. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McGrath.
I'd like to compliment all of the administrators and the faculty at our various schools who did all the work on the convocations. It's an amazingly hard job, time-consuming, and every graduation came off beautifully this year. Thank you so much for all your work.
Mrs. Haber.
I wasn't able to attend as much this year as last year because I have a hip problem that'll be taken care of next month. You'll see me doing the jig at the next meeting. Anyway, but I really did have some very special experiences. I attended and I even spoke at the African American convocation, and I was sort of in a down mood, and that whole experience just brought me right up. The music, those rhythms of Africa are so incredible. I've always been a great lover of jazz since I was a child, and I just thought to myself, this is where it all began, with these wonderful rhythms. And there were dancers and there were singers, and I think probably Swahili. It was fantastic. And we had a speaker who has become quite successful. She has a degree in mechanical engineering, and she spent 6 years in the community colleges. And I thought that was a good message to the students, that sometimes it takes a long time, but you can reach the top. And she has a very important job with Intel. She's working on her PhD. So she was a wonderful example for everyone. And I went to the annual Mancini Science Symposium at Paradise Valley, And there I saw students that I would have expected to be graduate students. You just can't imagine how well they were able to speak and explain areas that I really don't understand very well. And for instance, there was a girl that talked about how the respiratory system works, and she kind of waltzed around and she threw out all these terms, these medical terms, but she had no notes. That I was just stunned. I thought, this is amazing. And so that was a great experience. And then also I went to the Rio Salado High School Equivalence Graduation, and that was really incredible. And I just had a wonderful time, even though I wasn't able to attend as much as I could in former years. What I did see was fabulous.
Thank you. Mr. Sarr.
Yeah, I was fortunate this year because of the scheduling to go to 5 graduations, and it's the best time of the year, without question. I also want to make a special thank you to the Phoenix College Preparatory Academy High School, that is one of our charter schools, for their graduation. They graduated the largest class ever in the history of the school. So congratulations to that staff for really working hard to keep those students not only in school, but half of them graduated with their associate degree before they got their high school diploma in an environment that is challenging, and yet the faculty and staff do such a great job of working with those students. The most important thing and most exciting thing this month will be next Tuesday morning when I join our members of our facilities team to have an in-depth discussion about how autonomous vehicles are going to change the scope of our facilities. So I'll be back next month to talk about all the great things that our facilities team is working on, being the leaders in the United States for how to drop off and pick up students as opposed to how to park their cars.
We will look forward to that. Mrs. Livingston.
It wouldn't be a meeting without autonomous vehicles being mentioned. It could be pickleball. No comment. This is my final year in the graduation process, and I will have to say when I walked in at PVCC, I just about started crying. It doesn't take much to make me cry, but I almost did. And even these final months on the board will be much harder for me. To see a graduation is just so special, and to see it through a faculty's eyes is absolutely amazing. And so when I sat up front and faculty is across the way from you and sitting by faculty and hearing their excitement, to me is fabulous as a teacher. I'm always so inspired by the students' stories. That's what makes graduation. And this year, the greatest part was one of the students is the alumni cheerleader, so to speak, asking for donations immediately. And I love that particularly. And he was my former student. And to have somebody come up and say, hey, Mrs. L., I had you as you were my 8th grade language arts teacher. And it pretty much rolled that way because he's a theater student. And that was kind of his rolling with the punches. I just couldn't believe it. It absolutely made my evening to see a student graduating, already had graduated, working, and then pursuing the love and passion that I have in theater. Also, our partnerships with AAEC. I don't know how many 2-year degrees that we gave even before these youngsters graduated from high school. It was just a fabulous night, and I thank you so very much for always including me in your celebrations. Thank you.
Dr. Thor.
Well, I'm going to say similar things to what the other board members have shared, that along with Mr. Bartning and Mr. Sarr, I was able to attend all of the convocations with the exception of one. And I love the convocations because they're not only an opportunity to celebrate the accomplishments of our students, but to also celebrate the diversity of our student population. I was honored to speak at Rio Salato's commencement. It was particularly special for me because this is Rio Salato's 40th anniversary year. And speaking of dual enrollment students, Rio Salato had 120 dual enrollment students receive their associate degree before they have received their high school diploma. And having been president of Rio Salato when dual enrollment was first started in this district, that was extremely gratifying for me. I also had the opportunity to celebrate our GED students at the high school equivalency graduation, which is always a very, very special event, and attended a number of other award ceremonies as well. As this is the end of the academic year, I do want to wish the faculty and staff a very enjoyable summer, and I hope that everyone is able to get some rest and relaxation. And it is my hope that we will begin the next academic year in a better place than we end this one.
Thank you, Dr. Thor. I attended the Hsc graduation, which is probably my favorite graduation to attend. Everybody in that graduation's had some sort of challenge in life or they wouldn't be there. And they've overcome some sort of adversity and moved forward. And I just really enjoy seeing the graduates, and I had the opportunity to be on the stage and shake hands with them, and it was just a great experience. And one other thing I want to comment on is I want to thank our Adjunct Faculty Association President, Patricia Haas. I was having dinner probably about a month ago, maybe 6 weeks ago, with a group of people. Some of them I knew, some of them I didn't. And one of them at the table started talking about relocating to Arizona, and he's a history professor somewhere in the East. I forgot what state he was in, but somewhere in the East. And he was moving out here, and he was talking about looking for employment when he finished relocating out here. And he, as we were talking at the table, he realized that I was involved in the community college district. And he expressed his concern that he didn't know if he even wanted to consider applying at Maricopa for a position with the faculty. And I talked to him for a while, and he'd read things in the newspaper, and he was I have no idea what a faculty member looks for when they're looking for a job, but I listened to him for a little bit, and apparently some people read some of this stuff in the newspaper that our faculty association doesn't care for the district or the board or whatever else, and he was concerned. So I referred him to Patricia Haas. The next time we meet, I'm going to ask you how to say your last name correctly. We've met a number of times. Someday I'm going to ask you how to say it so I make sure I get it right, but I referred him to her. And I said, first I checked with her and said, can I give him your contact information? And she said yes, and I gave it to him, and I figured, okay, I'm done, I'm out of here. And then I started getting these emails from this guy. He's probably emailed me 7, 10 times. Every time I get the email, I don't recognize the name because I don't really know the guy other than this acquaintance, but now I know him, I remember his name because I keep seeing it in my email. And he keeps telling me how helpful she was and that she guided him and she directed him and she stayed in touch with him and she was so positive about the district and things are so wonderful and she was so upbeat. And it's just refreshing. She's obviously just an ambassador for our district. And I just thank you for, I don't know if you helped this gentleman because you and I have worked together, you did it for a favor to me, or just who you are. I suspect this is just who you are. The way he describes what you've done for him, I don't even have the words to describe it. I'm sure if he takes employment here, and I guess now he's being considered for a full-time position at Phoenix College, he's much more articulate than I am as a history professor, and he speaks much better than I do. I wouldn't be at all surprised if we saw him somewhere down the road at a board meeting telling us about the great experience he's had as he's gone through the process here. If he gets hired, maybe he will, maybe he won't, I don't know. But I just want to share that, and I just want to thank you. Before we adjourn, I want to remind everyone that Mr. Hibbs has a document that has to be signed as part of the taxation hearing we had tonight. So don't hurry out until he gets you to sign, or he'll be chasing. Yes. So please sign before you leave. If I can get a motion and a second to adjourn, we'll wrap up the meeting.
I move for adjournment.
I second it.
Meeting's adjourned.